That dude was a noodle-armed, fetal alcohol syndrome-looking, mother's basement dweller weirdo. Howdy folks, you're watching Deuce. Today we're going to talk about the attempt on Trump's life and whether that 140-yard shot was in fact easy or was it a difficult shot for someone to accomplish. The reason why I'm investigating this question is because I was recently at a party where I'm usually the gun guru, the gun guy, and that question was very prevalent amongst all the people at that party. By the way, that was an 80s themed party where I went as Tom Selleck in Magnum PI, but everyone thought I looked more like a fat Freddie Mercury. The most prominent question was whether or not that 140-yard shot was in fact difficult for someone to make, or was it something easy? Well, at first, my first inclination was that yes, it was a fairly easy shot, not too hard at all, but I've been shooting for well over 30 years. Due to time and experience, I am biased in that question. So I started thinking about it, and I came up with 3 categories on why now I think that was a very difficult shot. And those categories are: the equipment made it a difficult shot. Also, the shooter himself made it a difficult shot. And thirdly, the environment. By the way, if you're one of the last teachers like me who still use an honest-to-God blackboard, go ahead and spend the money and get yourself some full-touch chalk here, because this is the real deal. Stop buying it from Teacher Supplies or from Walmart. Get that stuff. Look how sharp and crisp that is. It's beautiful. In order to show my thought process on this first category, I'm going to need to mark down a target. So I'm just going to use a USPSA target and trace out the head. There we go. There's some orange fur from my cat Whiskey. The rifle was an old DPMS made AR-15, and I have one here. I bought one of these many years ago. This was the first upper that I put on a lower that I personally built. These were budget rifles. The reason why I have one is because it was the cheapest upper I could find at the time. So they are not the most accurate AR-15 out there. Typically you would find about a 2 MOA group out of a standard DPMS upper shooting standard store quality ammo. Every single rifle company out there has a variation on accuracy out of the box, and DPMS is no different. But you are just as likely to get a 3-inch grouping out of a DPMS as a 1-inch group. So I think 2-inch groups at 100 yards is a very average for that particular platform. So at 140 yards, that would be roughly, I'm going to say like 2.5, which would mean if that shooter had this rifle in a lead sled in a completely locked down scenario and everything was perfect, everything else was perfect, that is the best accuracy you get right there, is a 2.5-inch grouping at 140 yards. The second issue in the equipment is the fact that the shooter was not using any kind of magnified optic. From the pictures I saw, these are the closest pictures I can get of the rifle itself, but it looks like he's using a pair of flip-up sights and a red dot of some sort. I'm not sure what flip-up sights he's using. I've got a Magpul up front. I had a Magpul in the back, but it broke with some very rough handling, so I've got a metal one back here, and I've got a Hollow Sun 2.5 MOA red dot, and that's pretty typical for a rifle. Red dot is about 2 to 3 MOA. Typically they are on the smaller size of things. So on top of trying to center your rifle and your red dot onto the target, you're going to have some leeway because that big red dot will cover most of this target, which is going to be at least another inch at 140 yards of slop that you're going to have to deal with here. So let's go ahead and... So this is the variance in your shot if everything else about your shot was absolutely perfect. The third issue with the equipment that I noticed is the fact that he did not have any kind of stabilization or at least even a bipod. So that would have been important because it looks like he was just trying to steady it as best he could against the rooftop, and that was it. If for some reason I had to make a similar shot at a similar distance, I would use, number one, a bipod. I would use probably a low power variable optic like this. This is a 1:4 power loophole scope. I love that stuff. Or you could use a 4 power ACOG, also a really good option. Now let's talk about the shooter. From all observations I have seen, that dude was a noodle-armed, fetal alcohol syndrome looking, mother's basement dweller weirdo. Simple as that. I'm not going to put his picture up here, but from every picture I've seen of him, the guy looks so malnourished of vitamin D. You know he's not been outside enough to really get comfortable and familiar with long distance shooting. You have to be out in the sun to do that. There could be a couple of indoor ranges that stretch out to 150 and 200 yards. I've never seen him, I've never heard about him, but if they do exist, I highly doubt this dude was a member of that range. It's very easy for people with a lot of experience at the shooting range to undervalue that experience. Even a bad day at the range is an opportunity to learn how not to shoot, which is just as important as learning how to shoot. The last thing I want to mention about the shooter is that he had poor eyesight. I don't know how bad his vision was, but he had some pretty thick glasses on there. And I used to wear glasses back way before my eye surgery. And there was an issue back then. I did not use red dots at all because they always interfered with my stigmatism with my glasses. And if you look at someone with glasses looking down through the red dot, you can see that I am looking through the top half of your lenses. Your prescription is not made to look through the top half of your lenses. Your prescription is typically made to look through the very center of those lenses. So if he had astigmatism, which is what I had beforehand, the part of the lens way up here was way different than the lens right in front of my pupil. Now let's talk about the environment of the shooter's location. It was rough. It was not a shooting bench. It was not at a nice shooting range. It was not a pleasant day to be outside. It was very hot. And you know that roof had been baking in the sun all day long. So I bet that roof was well over 100 degrees to the touch. And the dude was wearing a normal t-shirt. On top of that, remember the guy was a noodle-armed weirdo who just climbed a ladder and army crawled across a hot roof. So you know he was hurting already. I mean, I've recently found out that I lost my cardio. This guy never had any cardio, you can tell. So firstly, the roof was hot and the guy was getting burned on that hot roof. Secondly, he was probably huffing and puffing after army crawling across that and going up the ladder with his gear. And thirdly, he was under duress because a cop had surprised him and he turned around from pointing his rifle at the police officer to going ahead and taking his shot without having to really settle down and take the shots calmly. He had to pretty much shoot very quickly. In conclusion, from my years and years of shooting experience, was this a difficult shot or an easy shot? Well, for the shooter who attempted this shot, it was a very difficult shot and was pretty much lucky to get as close as he did, which unfortunately looks very poorly on Secret Service and the law enforcement involved in that whole thing, because they really did drop the ball, in my opinion. Well, guys, that's it for me today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a like and go subscribe. A lot more is on the way. If you have any comments, questions, or show ideas, leave that comment down below. I try to answer as many of those as possible, especially at the very first hour or two of the video going public. So go ahead and put your question in there and I try to answer as many as possible. And as always, you guys have a great day. See ya.